Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your forbearance. We've now got the live stream working, which is one of these things. Technology always lets you down at the vital moment, doesn't it? But we're quite keen to get the meeting available to everybody who could see it. So welcome to you all, those in the room and those online. Lovely to see you all. We're here for a joint meeting of the Cabinets of Warwick and Stratford District Council to discuss the emerging South Warwickshire local plan. I'm Tony Perks. I'm here to open the meeting, and I will deal with the first item on today's agenda, which is the appointment of the chair from the members of the committee. Before moving on to this, there are just a couple of safety and procedural sort of announcements, fire exits and the like. There are no planned fire alarms this evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, then please make your way calmly, quickly and safely to the meeting point, which is at the car park to the right of the Windmill Pub. That's not in the Windmill Pub, it's to the right of the Windmill Pub. Next crisis averted. And secondly, if anybody is using the microphones this evening, because we are trying to live streaming the meeting, if you could speak clearly into the microphone so the feed is picked up, not just by the people in the room, but those listening in reception and online. So without further ado, I will move to the first item, which is the appointment of the chair for the meeting this evening. Please can I have any nominations for chair of the meeting this evening? Councillor Coucher.
I nominate.
You need to swipe your card. Sorry, they went off.
I nominate Susan Junod.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Davidson, thank you. Are there any other nominations? With that, I will pass the chair over to Susan Junod, Councillor Susan Junod, the leader of Stratford District Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome. Can I say welcome to everybody who is here tonight? Can I start the meeting by saying, can we have apologies for absence? Are there any apologies today? Okay. Okay, my apologies. I was going straight to the main agenda, but I've got here that in line with the membership confirmed at our annual council meeting for joint cabinet, I can confirm that councillors Coucher and Coles will remain my appointed members of this committee. And I'd like to remind members of the public in attendance that this is a joint meeting of the joint cabinet committee of Stratford and Warwick district councils. Members of the public are permitted to attend and observe, but only those that are registered in advance will be invited to speak, and only for a maximum of 5 minutes per person. I ask everyone in attendance to please be quiet and respectful and allow whoever is talking to be heard. If members of the public or councillors cannot comply with this, they will be asked to leave. And that is what I've been asked to put forward to you. So now I do have apologies for absence. And I believe there is one apology for absence. Councillor Davison.
We have Councillor Sinnott substituting for Councillor King and Councillor Chilvers substituting for Councillor Yella Pugada.
Thank you very much. And as you heard earlier, you know exactly who from my cabinet are here tonight. We have disclosures of interest is the next item that's on the agenda. Are there any disclosures of interest that anybody needs to make from any of the councillors tonight? Okay, and are you all happy for me to agree the minutes of our previous meetings of this joint cabinet committee? Agreed. Okay, agreed. We're now here tonight to look at the South Warwickshire Local Plan Regulation 19 publication version and to approve the Regulation 19 publication stage of the South Warwickshire Local Plan and seek representations from stakeholders and the public. For those of you who have got the printed copy, it is on pages 9 to 774. So it's quite a lengthy document for anybody to get through. But it is quite important. And the first thing that we have to do is to look at those people that want to be able to speak. So we have a running order of public speakers, other councillors, group leaders, OSC, overview and scrutiny chairs, as well as the South Warwickshire Plan Advisory Group chair. And then also we've got public speakers, and I have a list of public speakers who want to speak tonight, as well as councillors. So we will go through that, and I will be guided by the officers on that process. But before we begin, I'm just wondering whether we can have an introduction from John Carefoot, who is the head of South Warwickshire Local Plan Development here at Stratford District Council, but doing it for both Stratford District Council and Warwick District Council, just to introduce the format for tonight and what is exactly the overall, what we're going to be considering tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce the South Warwickshire Local Plan, or SWLP, if I may be permitted just to put on record some thanks, firstly to the policy teams of both councils for all the hard work in getting to this stage. Secondly, to colleagues from other departments, consultants, agencies and the County Council in particular for their input and assistance. And thirdly, to members of the both past and present of the advisory group who have steered officers throughout the preparation of the SWLP. Can I also thank members of both scrutiny committees for their input, acknowledge and apologise the relatively short timescale that members had to digest and formulate pertinent questions on the plan. This was not desired, but has been a result of the tight timetable that we're working to hit the December deadline. So in terms of some context, the planning system is changing. The government have imposed a deadline of December by which plans already in preparation need to be submitted for examination. If we miss or choose not to meet that deadline, then the SWLP would need to be examined under the new planning system and the new National Planning Policy Framework. This could add a further 2 years to the process. Given that neither Stratford nor Warwick can demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, it is imperative that the new local plan that meets the needs in full can be adopted as soon as possible. As the local planning authorities, it's the responsibility of both councils to prepare and keep up to date a local plan. Not doing so would be an abdication of those responsibilities. Now, I appreciate the very difficult decisions that need to be made in the South Warwickshire local plan, stemming primarily from a very high housing number. But members, please be under no illusion that not having a plan will not stop development. In fact, it's highly likely that without a plan, South Warwickshire will be faced with even more development. In addition, we'd be unable to coordinate and deliver the infrastructure required to support it. So having a local plan gives certainty to communities about what will happen where and what infrastructure can be expected. The plan sets out a proactive vision for what we want South Warwickshire to be like in 2050. It is a plan for a generation. The SWLP meets our development needs in full, in sustainable locations, including 2 new communities. It provides homes and jobs for our children and our grandchildren. But the SWLP is not without its challenges or risks. Delivery of infrastructure is a risk. Neither council is responsible for much of that infrastructure. The local plan cannot be used to remedy existing infrastructure deficiencies per se. There are a myriad of providers that are governed by their own regulatory and funding frameworks, whether that's the NHS, Highways, Severn Trent or Western Power. Our role, and this is the benefit of having a local plan, is to coordinate and ensure that that happens, that infrastructure is provided in a timely manner. And the best chance we have of doing that is through delivery on large strategic sites where the provision is made on site through a local plan. Supporting the SWLP is an infrastructure delivery plan, or IDP. That sets out the infrastructure will be provided and how it will be delivered. And that's a live document that will continue to be updated and refined as we progress. The preference for strategic scale interventions was a clear steer we had from members. But there are also a number of non-strategic, smaller sites, and these are required to ensure we can deliver homes quickly and from the very beginning of the plan period, particularly so we can regain our 5-year supply. All of the proposed allocations align with the priority areas in Figure 11 in the plan, so this considered the sustainability of locations across South Warwickshire. Now, sustainability is relative and does need to be seen in the context of South Warwickshire itself, in the fact that it is a largely rural area. Public transport is limited, but within that context, there are certain locations where that are more sustainable than others. The plan seeks to strike the right balance between ensuring the vitality of our rural communities and providing for local needs. It's therefore supportive of rural schemes by not relying on them to meet our housing needs. And high quality landscapes, special landscape areas and the Cotswolds National Landscape are protected through the plan. There will be impacts on existing communities. You cannot have development without having impacts. And accompanying the plan is a sustainability appraisal. And the role of the plan is to mitigate those impacts and ensure those impacts are not significant. As a local plan, it needs to be examined by an independent planning inspector and found sound. The examination looks at legal compliance, consistency with the MPPF, and whether the plan is deliverable, effective and justified. To ensure we have a sound plan, 2 addendums have been prepared, and these addendums address sort of 3 critical issues. One is the headroom in respect of housing supply, the second around having a full trajectory for Stratford District with additional sites, and the third is in respect of some concerns with development viability. In respect of viability, it's proposed to address those by applying the national standard for B&G, which is 10%, amending the affordable housing tenure split to 60-40 in favour of social rent to intermediate, applying site-specific affordable housing requirements for the strategic sites, and then amending the net zero policies to be subject to viability. Members, you have the report and recommendations before you. Thank you.
And are there any other officers that want to? No. Okay. Before I bring in public speakers, I'd like to just be able to say thank you to all those residents that emailed me. I was included in 3 waves of emails. One, obviously, in the early stages before the public consultation on the first stage of this local plan. But in the second, in the more recent times, I had 200 emails of which I've responded to, laying out that there is a process to be followed. And then I had, in the last few days, I've had another 40 emails that I have received. I have said to people that I will mention the fact that they have taken, and have appreciate the fact that they have taken the trouble to email me, and that officers were copied in, and officers will take on into consideration all the issues that they raised. Say that there was one wave before the first public consultation, and then now there are others that have come in before the Reg 19 consultation. So all of those people, it is appreciated, and all their considerations and all their concerns have been noted. So thank you very much indeed for that. Now I do have public speakers, and the first one that I've got on my list is Mr. Julian Philcox. Welcome to the public speaker. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Chair.
that will be timed, if you don't mind, in order that we can make sure that everybody fits in.
Of course. Our concern in respect of the plans is in the respect of the plan's ability to deliver. We want the plan to succeed ultimately, but feel it needs further work now, and for both councils to acknowledge that racing to adhere to an artificial December deadline brings with it the risk of errors, evidence gaps, and missed opportunities. A question first, though. The plan as proposed promotes 2 new settlements, Hatton and Long Marston Airfield. The question is, which settlement options came in 3rd, 4th and 5th in the council's selection exercise, and in what order? Our view is that contingency and the need to pivot might well be required here to ensure soundness. Planning, as we know, is a cyclical exercise. We gather information, we formulate a plan, we implement the plan, and then we review the plan and so on. My next question: how does one assess the success or otherwise of Long Marston over the last 10 or 11 years? Only 1/3 of the 1,100 houses due to have been completed by 25-26 have been built. And the original Southwestern Relief Road has not received planning permission, let alone started. Objectively, reviewing that lack of delivery, housing and infrastructure, how can one sensibly expect that same site to perform going forwards? Decision makers today have that 10 years of evidence of lack of delivery, whereas your predecessors 10 or more years ago did not. Don't squander or dismiss that evidence is our advice, but have proper regard to it. Within this evidence report, County and District of 2017, in respect of the Relief Road, is evidence of the assurances made 10 years ago on the Relief Road's delivery. It states variously: during the examination in public, the site promoters for the Long Marston Airfield were able to clearly demonstrate a viable and deliverable route for the Southwestern Relief Road. I paraphrase now. They presented a case demonstrating that the road could be delivered, but it wasn't. When challenged, promoters stated that they would fund and deliver the identified infrastructure, which was confirmed in a statement of common ground. Again, it wasn't delivered. However, the report goes on to give further interest. Given allegations at the time that alternatives to the then proposed route had not been examined, the council set out why various options had been set aside. One option, called the further west route, which roughly aligns with the corridor we're looking at today, the report states: the consideration of this option has identified that the route and its potential has little merit, as it would not be on the strategic desire line of trips within Stratford town, especially the north-south movement. As there would be little time saving to motorists for this route, they would continue to utilise existing routes through the town, exacerbating issues on all known pinch points. In addition, it would attract additional traffic through surrounding villages, such as Stratford-on-Avon, Millcote, Long Marston and Binton, many of which have roads that are very rural in nature, country lanes, and are unsuitable for significant increases in motorised traffic. In terms of additional impact, the road would still have to cross the River Avon and its floodplain at some point, and there would be significant impact on the landscape due to the rural nature of the surrounding area. In addition, the length of the road would be greater and its impact is therefore magnified, as are building costs. Mr. Carriford, at yesterday's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, confirmed that with regard to the Relief Road, or bypass, it is the biggest risk in the plan. I admit that, were his words. We don't disagree with him. There are many examples, Shrewsbury being a recent one, where an infrastructure project, a relief road, got out of hand in terms of delays, costs tripled, almost causing the financial collapse of the council. The scheme was scrapped. The relief road, and with it Long Marston Airfield, carry far too much risk and uncertainty for the plan. The councils owe their taxpayers more than betting all on red in case it comes up black. No one wants that. Going back to an earlier point, best to look at cheaper and better connected contingency sites now to save this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. The next person I've got, unless any, shall we save questions and answers at the end? I have one or two things that have been written down. Mr. John Russell.
Is that working? Yeah.
Again, you have
Okay.
5 minutes.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Can I just hit my watch going so that I don't drag on? Apologies.
Thank you.
10,000 dwellings at Long Marston is a new town of around 24,000 people, similar in scale to Stratford-upon-Avon. Stratford benefits from established rail services, strong public transport, employment and education provision, and access to the strategic road network, making it a sustainable, well-connected location. In contrast, Long Marston is a remote rural site with very limited transport connectivity. This is clear when analysing the sustainable transport connectivity of Long Marston using the Department for Transport's connectivity tool. The tool places Long Marston within the bottom 10% nationally for sustainable transport connectivity. It is an extremely poorly connected location according to the government standards. Use of the tool as the standard national metric is established through a ministerial statement. It should be used in plan making to guide development towards locations that can realistically support sustainable travel patterns. The Council has failed to undertake this basic sustainability assessment. It is failing to meet the expectations of the Secretary of State. Nonetheless, Council-led studies align that Long Marston is not a suitable location for major growth. It is distant from employment centres. It is poorly connected to the strategic road network. It has no operational rail service and no other mass transit system planned. Even with trip internalisation, a new town of this size will still generate substantial external travel demand. The former railway line into Stratford is no longer viable for reuse without major reconstruction, including reinstating sections where the alignment has been lost. Buses are far less efficient than railway systems for serving strategic development demand. A frequency of 8 to 12 buses per hour is required to provide a similar service of just one train per hour. But unlike trains, bus services would be subject to the same congestion as general traffic. Cycling via the Greenway may support limited local trips, but it is not going to make any meaningful reduction in external car dependency given the scale of travel demand. Most external trips will therefore be made by car and travel towards Stratford on a road which already suffers from significant congestion. Adding to this, a conservative estimate shows that just the development peak hour traffic flow in isolation, just the Long Marston, would exceed the road's capacity by over 500 vehicles in 1 hour. This will result in traffic displacing onto unsuitable rural roads and severe queuing, with buses also trapped in the same congestion. The proposed Western Relief Road is increasingly relied upon as a key mitigation, but yet it does not directly serve Long Marston. Its delivery is uncertain as it would require major river and floodplain crossings, substantial bridge and viaduct structures, extensive land acquisition, significant environmental mitigation to overcome the environmental harm caused to the river basin, at least, and upgrade to the A46. Cost uncertainty is significant and is currently valued by the Council at £500 million of uncertainty, reflecting the scale of potential engineering and environmental risks. No confirmed funding source exists for infrastructure of this magnitude at either end of the cost scale. Developments, I can guarantee, will not pay that amount of money. Promoting strategic development at a location with such poor transport sustainability and which is dependent on new roads with such uncertainty represents a very high-risk strategy. There is a very real probability that even if adopted, this plan will fail in its early stages, meaning that this authority will lose its ability to control future development patterns. By contrast, there are at least 14 other locations around Stratford which already benefit from strong rail connectivity and existing infrastructure capacity. These are all locations that align with existing and the consultation government policy favouring rail accessible growth as the most sustainable and suitable location for development. They offer a more sustainable and deliverable approach to accommodating future housing need than Long Marston, which fundamentally remains a road-based and road-dependent location with a £500 million level of risk on the road infrastructure needed for it to exist. Thank you.
You brought help as well.
Yep. Can I thank you? And the next speaker I have on the list is Mr. Adam Jordan. If you'd like to begin.
Of the committee. My name is Adam Jordan and I'm a resident of Willicote, which is set within glorious open countryside between Clifford Chambers and Shackleton Village. I stand before you tonight because I genuinely believe South Warwickshire is at a crossroads and the decisions made in this room will shape our countryside, our communities and our way of life for generations. And I say this plainly, these proposals are not simply misguided, they are fundamentally wrong. I strongly object to the proposed large-scale developments south of Stratford-upon-Avon, including, but not limited to, the LMA settlement and the South West Relief Road. Because this is not modest growth, it is the creation of a new town in the heart of rural South Warwickshire. Thousands of homes would permanently urbanise countryside that has defined this area for centuries, and once this landscape is gone, it is gone forever. These fields are not empty spaces waiting to be built on, they are open countryside that separate our villages, preserve their identity, support wildlife and farming, and create the rural character that makes this part of Warwickshire so special. Residents fear village after village will lose its identity as development spreads across the countryside until communities that have stood independently for generations are swallowed into one continuous urban sprawl around Stratford. And all of this is being proposed while infrastructure is already failing residents now. People sit daily in traffic around Stratford's river crossings. Rural roads are congested. GP appointments are harder to access. School places are stretched. Public services are under pressure. Yet communities are now expected to absorb over 10,000 homes at LMA alongside thousands more across Bidford, Wellesbourne, Stratford West and Stratford South, all relying on the same overstretched infrastructure. Residents have heard promises before. At Shackleton and Meon Vale, development came first while infrastructure lagged behind. Roads remain congested, planning breaches remain concerning the B4632 corridor, public transport remains poor, and community services have failed to keep pace. So residents are asking a fair and simple question. If infrastructure has been delivered so poorly before, why should anyone believe it will be different this time forward? And there is another uncomfortable truth. This is not sustainable development. Public transport is weak, bus services are unreliable, walking and cycling links are fragmented. Future residents would be overwhelmingly dependent on cars for almost every aspect of daily life. That is not sustainable planning, it is unsustainable expansion. The proposed relief load is being presented as the answer, but many residents see it for what it really is. It's a gateway to even more development in the future. New roads do not simply remove congestion, they create more traffic, more pressure, and more sprawl. Meanwhile, the environmental damage would be irreversible. Countryside would disappear, wildlife habitats would be fragmented, productive farmland would be lost, dark skies would vanish, and the setting of the Cotswold National landscape would be harmed forever. There are better alternatives, locations with stronger transport links, better infrastructure, and access to strategic corridors such as the A46 and the M40. Instead, rural communities are being asked to sacrifice the very landscape and identities that make South Warwickshire worth protecting in the first place. So I ask you all tonight, think very, very carefully about the legacy of these decisions, because future generations will not remember policy wording or housing targets. They will remember whether this council protected South Warwickshire or whether irreversible damage was allowed in the name of unsustainable growth. Please listen to residents. Please reconsider these proposals, and please do not allow the countryside south of Stratford to be lost forever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You brought health as well.
The next speaker that I have on my list is Mr. Andy Crump, the chair of Mickleton Against Inappropriate Development. And again, just a reminder that you have 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm chair of Mickleton Against Inappropriate Development. When I moved to Mickleton 31 years ago, apart from the Royal Engineers Supply Depot at Long Marston, the B6432 was bounded by over 7 miles of unspoilt countryside that provided a suitably rural gateway to the North Cotswolds. Such rural continuity began to be disrupted around 10 years ago through developments at Meon Vale and Shackleton Village. Far greater urbanisation and loss of cherished countryside is looming, however, in the form of the LMA settlement proposal under a local plan that stretches an inordinate length of time until 2050. For families heading for the Cotswolds along the B4632, it won't be just the children asking, are we nearly there yet? The requisite funding for the bypass, which stands as a precursor for further development of LMA, has been unresolved for around 8 years, during which period the cost of construction have escalated around 5-fold to 150 million. Will the council be able to borrow such a vast sum, and if so, at what cost to its council taxpayers? An additional source of funding will require 2,800 houses to be built in countryside to the south of Stratford, adding yet further road and other infrastructure pressures to the locality. Amidst all of this is an odd suggestion that the wider LMA site could actually be developed ahead of the bypass if the Highways Authority gives the go-ahead. Is this not simply putting the cart before the horse, infrastructure-wise, and a means of funding issues? Wherever it is constructed and whenever it is built, the bypass will not alleviate additional demands arising from new residents wishing to utilise retail and leisure facilities in Stratford Town Centre. Beyond the traffic chaos that will undoubtedly ensue in the absence of any infrastructure improvements there, a major concern involves the lack of an A&E department at Stratford Hospital. Given that Warwick will also experience exponential growth over the planned period, its own hospital will be unable to cater for the thousands of additional Stratford patients, A&E or otherwise. How will their need to be accommodated? Provision of new housing in South Warwickshire does not reflect the natural growth of the population through local need. It's caused by in-migration from a number of the other 13 local authorities within the Greater Birmingham housing market area, wherein shortfalls are being absorbed by Warwick and Stratford councils, partly as a result of reduced housing targets of Birmingham and Coventry. Resulting in migration from urban areas should not lead to the concreting over of swathes of South Warwickshire countryside, but instead cause houses to be built much closer to the sources of the unmet need, i.e. as close as possible to the West Midlands conurbation and deployment centres, not miles away from them in unsustainable locations. In this respect, areas north of Stratford will be eminently more sustainable than NMA or South Stratford. There is far better rail and road connectivity north of Stratford, and the need for a bypass will be greatly reduced, if not eliminated, thus saving a vast amount of public money. The LMA settlement proposal will have significant implications for the North Cotswolds villages that adjoin the B4632, in terms of major increases in traffic along inadequate country roads and consequent noise, air and light pollution that will have adverse impacts upon the setting of the Cotswold National Landscape at Meon Hill and the Greater Escarpment. Why do the joint councils deem it necessary to provide for an additional 5,700 homes at LMA beyond the end of the local plan period in 2050? I invite councillors to revisit figure 14 on page 39 of Appendix 1 to the Regulation 19 SWLP documentation. This table clearly shows that the Stratford district's target figure of 27,800 can be met by 2050, with 4,500 homes at LMA. There can be no justification, therefore, for an additional 5,700 homes which are not required to achieve the Council's objectives within the local plan period. That figure should be removed from the SWLP forthwith, as it is completely unsound. It is difficult to evaluate the enormity of Shakespeare's enduring legacy to the Stratford district over the best part of 6 centuries. But one thing is very clear. If the LMA and South Stratford developments proceed, then one benefit of that legacy, namely tourism, will be damaged through a depreciation of the rural environment and heritage. And in turn, the legacy of the joint councils here today may well warrant the renaming of one of them as Stratford-on-Avon Overdeveloped District Council. Thank you.
You brought help as well.
Again, can I say thank you? The next person I have on the list is Miss Belinda Littleton. Would you like to begin?
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. I would like to address 2 soundness issues in this plan. Firstly, effectiveness, and secondly, consistency with national policy. So first, to effectiveness. It is a requirement for a sound local plan that it demonstrates a 5-year supply of housing land on adoption of that plan and that it is deliverable over the plan period. A sound local plan must show, therefore, a deliverable 5-year housing supply. Yet 150 homes are proposed at Longmarston Airfield by March 2033, even though earlier transport assessments said that growth of southwest of Stratford requires a relief road, now the Stratford bypass, which is not due until 2035. Therefore, how can those 150 houses be built? The plan also proposes 500 homes at Longmarston Airfield by 2035, ahead of that infrastructure, the relief road. Those homes are therefore not deliverable. The SWLP forecasts new build completions falling to around 300 homes per annum in 27-28, and yet assumes delivery will then rise sharply to over 1,600 homes a year by 2030-31. The stepped trajectory proposed within the first 5 years is at odds with the possible options available to put forwards. As the Council's own barrister noted, the evidence base shows deliverable greenfield sites can already be identified within Stratford District that fit the spatial strategy better. For these reasons, the plan does not demonstrate effectiveness and therefore does not pass the test of soundness. The second failing of soundness is consistency with national policy. I'll flag 4 failings of soundness here. First, the garden village designation. In 2017, the government announced Longmarston as a garden village, defined as 1,500 to 10,000 homes. There are already 3,500 homes with permission, and this plan adds more than 10,000 extra, which takes the proposal beyond a garden village and into a garden town definition. That is not what the government originally backed. Secondly, affordable housing. Stratford's policy seeks 35% affordable housing on eligible sites, yet only 28% has been achieved in the last 5 years. Longmarston Airfield offers just 15%, less than half of your proposed policy level, and paltry compared to other strategic allocations, which have all got 40%. The evidence base shows deliverable alternatives exist that would do better to achieve your affordability targets. Thirdly, alignment with the spatial development strategy and 20-minute principles. Longmarston Airfield is the furthest potential site from an A&E, over 15 miles from Warwick Hospital, which is certainly more than 20 minutes when you're trying to get through or around Stratford, with no rail and no direct bus, all reliant on that poorly maintained B road, the B4362. 4632. Regardless of the bypass, residents would depend on that B road for access to schools, specifically secondary schools are all north of the Avon, healthcare and everyday services in Stratford. This is not a 20-minute community. Fourthly, the sustainability appraisal. To be legally compliant, a Regulation 19 plan must be accompanied by a completed and approved sustainability appraisal. Your current working draft showcases serious adverse effects, increased greenhouse gas emissions, in part because there's no sustainable transport option for LMA. Rail does not exist, despite the pervasive use of a diagram in all SWLP documents, which shows a rail line running north-south through the site. Even the cost estimates for the Stratford bypass do not allow for rail provision under it. The sustainability appraisal also flags permanent loss of soil resources. Much of LMA is farmland and green field. Adverse effects of the Cotswold National Landscape. These impacts could all be reduced by amending the proposal. I therefore ask councillors to amend this plan to make it sound, reallocate early housing to sites that are genuinely deliverable, prioritise places that provide affordable housing, and support communities with access to health services, education and sustainable transport. Please champion truly sustainable development in Stratford District. Thank you.
Thank you again. Again, thank you very much indeed. That is appreciated. The next person I've got on my list is Mr. Peter Murta from Luddington Parish Council.
This one. Yeah.
Would you like to begin?
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the proposed bypass, or rather, as I would call it, the corridor of uncertainty and wishful thinking. A corridor grasped at by planners, developers and politicians to come up with a magic house building number of 17,000 plus houses. This 2050 build plan, which will never happen, will be given to the same developers who have failed in 10 years to build more than 400 houses in Long Marston. The absolute definition of failure. But let's return to the corridor. This is not a plan that has no defined route, no realistic budget, no survey and no funding. It starts at a B road somewhere near the garden centre on Camden Road, with no plan or research as to how that junction will work. It runs out across productive farmland, slicing farms into pieces, creating unusable spaces ripe for developers to attack. It crosses over Millcote Lane, unable to decide whether they need a bridge or a roundabout, flies over the Greenway, hits a floodplain, jumps the River Avon, bridges the Luddington Road, maybe. It possibly turns across Borden Hill and apparently lands on the Evesham Road, another junction required with no details or research supplied. This then maybe joins up with the A46, or maybe not. So no plan, no survey, no budget, no money. Just a lot of blight on the houses, businesses and the people in the vicinity of the corridor for a road that may or may not happen. If somehow this ridiculous amount of money required to build it was extracted from the taxpayers of this district, achievement would be to create more traffic, to suck development up to the ring. It would create around Stratford, rather than the areas intended in this plan. The developers would drip feed the little housing they would complete so as to maintain their profit margins by sustaining a lack of supply. Would we get the infrastructure based on past performance? Not likely. Just think what could be done with the money that may be spent on this white elephant if it was used for houses in the town. All the criminally neglected properties and vacant sites. So back to the corridor of uncertainty. Will the money to build it ever be raised? Unlikely. The projected housing number cannot be achieved without it being included in the plan. There is no real attempt to cost it. It is the back of an envelope, wishful thinking, but the blight it will cause, the mental distress, The genuine heartache and the fear it will cause is very real, to say nothing of the harm it will do to the already struggling natural environment. What happened to the SDC climate emergency? If this is adopted by the council and it somehow gets past the inspectors, even though it pretty much breaks all of their guidelines regarding environmental damage, encourages road traffic, settlements will have no public transport of note. It will bring more cars into the town centre, will not alleviate current congestion, but will make it worse. Homes are important. Affordable homes are more important. Homes within reach of good public transport and jobs are the most important. This plan does not deliver on any of those fundamentals. If by some miracle the inspectors don't see through the fact that there is no real chance of delivery, this corridor will hang heavily over the people of Stratford, the people you are supposed to represent. If this road was ever actually built, it would not be in my lifetime, but my children might come to say, do you remember how beautiful it used to be when Dad lived here? I count myself privileged to have found this wonderful heart of England and know how lucky we are to live here. There are much better alternatives to this ill-thought-out, desperate attempt to reach its fictitious goal of housing numbers, which will not be achieved with or without the road. I urge you, when you vote, to think of the legacy you will leave for the future.
Thank you very much indeed. That is appreciated. Thank you.
You got help as well.
The next speaker I have on my list is Jeff Date from Millcote. Jeff Date.
Okay, well, apologies. I didn't think I was going to speak. I was told that I was too far down the list. So I haven't prepared anything. Do I need to swipe?
No, you're already...
All right. I apologise I've not prepared anything, but you've heard others speak eloquently about the plan and the failings within the plan. I'm no expert. I don't represent any group. I live in Millcote, but I've lived in Stratford district for nearly half a century, in the town and in the rural villages surrounding, and it is a lovely market town in a predominantly rural district. Your plan, as my colleagues have suggested, risks that rurality. And I would ask you, please, to go... Is there a high-rise building in Stratford? Not really, but if you went up, say, the tower next to the theatre, that's probably as high as you can get, and look out, and in particular, look west, because the countryside comes right up to the town. If you walk past where Shakespeare's buried, down Mill Lane, half a dozen houses or so, then the South Seven Meadows Road Bridge, and then countryside. People living in Stratford can walk straight out into the countryside, and they do. But when you're looking from that tower out west towards Weston-on-Avon and Welford-on-Avon, you'll see there is no development. What this plan proposes is a flyover. You can't get much more urban than that. It's a flyover to take a road that facilitates the ill-advised plan for 10,000 houses in Long Marston across the Greenway, across the River Avon Valley, very close to Luddington. It's now been renamed by yourselves as the bypass. But why do you need a bypass? What is the purpose of a bypass? If those people are having to go to work and leisure and shopping and bypassing Stratford, you're building the houses in the wrong place. They should be built where those people want to live. And the one thing I would like to get across, John Careford, we've not met, you said that the South Warwickshire local plan shouldn't really be a vehicle for sorting out deficiencies elsewhere. But I think that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get another river crossing. And to do so, a big development at Long Marston, which will give you, you hope, the funding for this new road scheme. It is a road that you can't afford, and in reality, nor can the developers. If they're to develop enough social housing, there isn't the funds in there to do £500 million or whatever it ends up costing. So ask yourself this: why do we need a bypass? And we're going to fund it by building more houses that are going to get more people coming to that bypass, yes, but also going through Welford, going through Clopton Bridge. Ultimately, others will pick the holes in this plan. I want to pick up on one word, and that is South Warwickshire local plan. This is not a local plan. This is your version of trying to achieve a dictate from central government. You must have all these new houses. I'm saying to you, you aren't here to represent central government. You're here to represent the likes of me and the people behind me. And we aren't calling for this. No one in Long Marston is saying, oh, please make us part of an even bigger housing estate. The reality is that if John Careford is right, and you are not supposed to use the South Warwickshire local plan as a means by which you fund something else, i.e. a third river crossing, then you all know this is a bad plan, but it isn't a local plan. And the people who vote for this, it will be a long-lasting legacy. And when you take your children or your grandchildren up the tower and you look across and you see that flyover, you'll say, I was part of that. I voted for that. I didn't expect all the houses to be built up to it, but it was in the middle of fields when I voted for it. Please, please recognise, people like me were very late to the party. I knew there was a proposal for Long Marston, but it was something like 7th or 8th in priority. I assumed, like all others, that it was there because you showed you'd considered it. But in reality, it's crept up. It's crept up. And I only knew of this threat in spring of this year, which is why I hadn't objected beforehand, hadn't consulted with you.
Thank you very much indeed. That is
Okay,
appreciated.
thank you.
Thank you.
From the heart.
Thank you. The next speaker I have on my list is George David Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My own professional background is in school management and leadership, so I know the world of plans. And I have to say, this plan does appear to me rushed, with very, very late uploads onto the website. Seems strange to me, given the environment we're in, that there is no flood risk assessment within the plan. And the fact that we simply don't know where the money will come from or how much of it we will need seems to me even the more extraordinary. What I want to do is just quickly review with you your 5 stated underpinning principles which are supposed to guide all of your planning decisions within SDC. So the first one is to be climate resilient and net zero carbon, etc., etc. We've done some calculations, and the cost of construction of the houses under the road, if you use the south of the river site as compared with the north of the river one, introduces huge additional costs. And I've equated it, I've done the maths if anyone's interested. It's equivalent to every one of the inhabitants of the Long Marston Garden Village doing a return trip to New York every year for 25 years. It's a lot of carbon in the wrong direction. Well-designed and beautiful is your second underpinning principle. You talk of creating public spaces and neighbourhoods where people want to be, da-di-da. Well, Long Marston village will be like 10,000 sore thumbs sticking up, I'm afraid. It will not be beautiful, and the road that would accompany it and would be necessary part of it would be absolutely horrendous. It really would be. Number 3, health is safe and inclusive, enabling safe, healthy lifestyles to improve quality of life. Additional sports facilities, etc. Well, yes, that's great, but the problem is the track record of developers is very poor on that. What are the guarantees that this will happen? And I notice within that the need to address regional health inequalities. Well, I looked that one up this afternoon. There don't seem to be any regional health inequalities facing the South Warwickshire. So I think that's a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist. 4th is being well connected, ensuring that new developments are physically and digitally linked, prioritising accessible locations, active travel, da-di-da, the 20-minute neighbourhood concept. But what's this new development linked to? That there is no connection. Are we imagining some sort of wonderful world of a new standalone town with all its own facilities, with happy people wandering around waving at cyclists? I somehow don't think it's going to be quite like that. I think it'll just be everyone getting in their cars and driving north, south, east and west. The last one is to be biodiverse and environmentally resilient. Well, words fail me on that. How can what is being proposed possibly satisfy that criterion, which you wrote yourselves? I didn't make it up. How can it be that? The road itself is an extraordinary construction, just ploughing up a significant part of South Warwickshire. So there's 5 core principles. With a background in teaching, I scored each of them against 2, so you have a maximum of 10, and I've given you 2 out of 10 for your effort. So my mid-term comment to councillors on the South West Local Plan is that you can and you must do better. And frankly, we, the residents, deserve better. Thank you.
Homework set. Homework set.
And the last person that I have on my list from the public speakers is George Hutton Attenborough.
Good evening.
Again, 5 minutes. Yeah.
Chair, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking on behalf of Mike Woolsby from Upper Quinton OBE, who couldn't be here because he's on holiday. So I'm just reading out what he would like to say. He says, I object very strongly to the above plan for the following reasons. All the villages will lose their individuality and identity through the development, proximity and scale. These include Long Marston, Upper Quinton, Lower Quinton, Luddington and of course Meon Vale, which is quite large enough in its own right. Our landscape will be destroyed, including the setting of the Cotswold National Landscape, the AONB, a nationally important designation and elevated views from the north within Preston-on-Stour and Clifford Chamber parishes. Surrounding communities will face worsening traffic congestion with associated air and noise pollution. Floodplain risks, topography and rising engineering costs have not been properly addressed for the new relief road proposal. The significant bridge required to span Luddington Road, the Avon and Greenway would of course blight the landscape. The Iran war has already pushed up costs and UK infrastructure tends to cost far more than anticipated. The money could instead be much better spent on affordable housing within the districts. Planning relies too heavily on the private car use, with no rail and sustainable transport links. Development should be where transport choices are available, near rail and bus routes, and ideally near the strategic road network, the A46, the M40, the M42. Site E1 and SG19 have none of these. Sites north of the river do. The existing Mickleton to Stratford Road is classed as a B road and at times now is heavily overloaded with large trucks. It also serves as a feeder road into Stratford, and we have all just seen how congested the centre of Stratford does become during the day. And it's getting worse, with a continuous building which is ongoing around the Stratford perimeter all the time. The proposed relief road is being used as a trigger for excessive housing expansion and will bring negative impacts of its own on the countryside and communities and lead to increased pressure for further future development. In any case, the previous relief road plan of 2016 failed to deliver. 10 years later, no relief road. The 2018 relief road planning application is still to be determined. This history casts doubt on whether a relief road would ever come forward, let alone the matter of cost. Once again, better to spend that money on much needed affordable housing and other infrastructure across the districts than on this white elephant. And finally, you must realise that good alternative locations for housing with stronger transport connections are being overlooked. These sites, Bearley, Tanworth in Arden, 3 sites, A1 and A2, and east of Dansey, Hatton, B1, Leamington, X1 and X2, and not forgetting the major road connections as the A46 and M40. Overall, it looks very much as though the planners have taken the easy, albeit more expensive option of dumping a huge conurbation into which all the attractive villages which form part of the Cotswolds area of outstanding natural beauty will be subsumed and lose their individual identities. It would be such a shame to destroy this beautiful part of the English countryside and so unnecessary if you follow the reasoning above. I strongly urge you rethink these plans for the good of the community. Michael Woolsby, OBE, Upper Quinton, past Quinton Parish Council Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Expertly read.
And I'd mentioned earlier that I'd had personally something like 200 emails. Some of those emails were for, and some of them were against. So that all those views have been fed through to officers. There was also an earlier consultation in. The original scoping report was done in 2021 for this, and the issues and options report was done in 2022. But there was an earlier consultation, and lots and lots of people put in their views, both pro and against, at that one, those consultation, and all those points of view have been taken into account and will be taken into account. I also need to update you that I have also received notification of a petition that will be presented to the council, this council, on the, I think on the 8th of June, with over 1,000 people signing that petition in favour of the road to the south of the district. So there are different points of view, and obviously as a council we will have to take into account all the consultations that have, and responses, and the consultations, and everybody that has put forward emails and also attended tonight. And I would like to just say, I do appreciate it. I really do appreciate the different points of view that have been brought forward. We do need to hear all of those. But before I go forward, I would just like to be able to ask one question, a couple of questions that were raised that don't seem to be clarified. One is the importance of the December deadline. Why are we aiming for the December deadline? What will change? The other question is about the clarification about what the government is actually saying that and the standard method, the calculations and what that does mean to us. And then if we could just kind of get another clarification about the various stages of consultation that have gone on through this local plan. Perhaps I could ask officers to just answer some of the other queries that have been raised today.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps to start with your questions, if I may. So the As I said earlier, the impact of the deadline is the introduction of a new planning system. That new planning system is looking to prepare plans in a much shorter time frame, with arguably less public involvement than we have already. But I think the big risk is the delay adds to getting a plan adopted. As I said, neither district can demonstrate a 5-year housing demand supply. If we were not to go for the December deadline, we would have... Sorry, apologies. So if we don't hit the December deadline, then the real risk is delaying adoption of a plan. And the impact of that is the inability to control and manage development. And we carry on not having a 5-year supply, and we're at the mercy of speculative applications. And that's what having a plan seeks to address, is to manage development in what we consider to be the reasonable and best way. That's not to say that, yeah, that's always the preferred way for many residents. So it's around thinking about what the consequences of not having a plan are, and being faced with lots of applications on speculative sites that won't have the infrastructure accompanying them, and that's certainly a big concern for residents and members. Chair, you asked about the standard method. Again, that's been in place in 2024, and that has really been the primary cause of the loss of 5-year housing demand supply. Certainly in this district, we're not alone. I think possibly at least half of local planning authorities across the country in a similar position as is Warwick. It has had a massive increase in the numbers. I think it's doubled the previous standard method figures, and certainly it's a big increase over the 730 figure we were planning with. Obviously, that's a national government decision. They've been clear that those figures are the starting point. The advice from officers is to plan for that need. I'm not aware of any real expectation that you can challenge that. If you're not prepared to plan for those needs in full, then you won't have a plan, and then you go back to the 5-year supply issue that we're trying to avoid. And then in the third question, Chair, you've asked around consultation. So yes, there's been various rounds of consultation. We had a scoping consultation, I think, in 2021, issues options, preferred options, and then we've got this consultation coming up, subject to approval. And then just to clarify what happens next, we would then submit the plan with any amendments to the government. They would have an examination in public, and then there could be a further consultation to consult on any major modifications the inspector thinks necessary. So that's in summary the stages we've got to. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. My next next people who can speak are other councillors. Have I got any other councillors that wish to speak today? Councillor Whalley-Huggins, Councillor Pemberton. Again, there is a time. I believe it. Is there a time limit for councillors? No time limit. Okay, but yeah, reasonable. Thank you, Councillor Whalley-Huggins.
Thank you, and please forgive my ridiculous voice at the moment. I am astounded and appalled that those in charge of this are proceeding towards a Schedule 19 publication in a matter of days. You are proceeding with a plan that will have so many amendments or continued addendums during the consultation as to make it legally dubious. The Regulation 19 is supposed to be the document that will pretty much be what is submitted for approval by PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, and several central government. The PIN's advice note basically says that the South Warwickshire local plan and what will be subject to the Regulation 9 consultation just isn't going to pass muster. It's just not good enough. You need to provide the details required by PINs fully within the South Warwickshire local plan for consideration. The addendums are scarce on detail, and yesterday at OSC in Stratford we had an addendum to an addendum, never been seen before. We do not believe that the addendums adequately cover the 33 serious matters raised by PINs. Those are 33 out of 45 that are in the bold type. I will be notifying PINs of your intention to go ahead with the Schedule 19, despite the lack of detail and against their stern warning about doing so before all matters that they raise are addressed. The public have been told that any plan is better than no plan, that if a site is not within the South Warwickshire local plan, that it will be safe from development. But that's not true. A rejected plan, or a plan that is asked to be withdrawn, as warned by PINs, renders this district and the wider area even more development, apocalyptically devastating in terms of location and quantity. PINs have been very clear about the damning inadequacies of this plan. Therefore, the South Warwickshire local plan and its addendums is the equivalent of writing a cheque that you know will bounce. Both councils and those currently in charge are just hoping that the cheque doesn't bounce before the next round of political elections. Furthermore, just one more thing, those observing might want to check how the councillors who have made the decisions around this plan are affected by it. Look at the housing numbers for the areas where they live. Thank you.
Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try not to repeat or cover ground that's been covered by public speakers and by Councillor Wally Huggins. What I do want to make clear is that you have had a clear steer from a fairly withering assessment by the Planning Inspectorate that there is a significant amount of homework. We've had a teacher speak to us earlier on tonight about how we make this plan viable, deliverable in a way that is going to pass at the planning inspector. Our own legal advice and our own officers tell us that the changes required are so significant that they require public consultation. You are taking the view that you do not need to do that and that the Regulation 19 and delegating the sustainability appraisal and the viability assessment changes to a core of, in essence, 4 people is good enough. That in itself is a risk. The number of people who are likely to cry foul about that, you'll be able to see from space. You acknowledge risks in even what you're trying to do. The notion that you've been told you can't have BNG at 20%. You've been told you can't have net zero at beyond national standard. And the elegant solution you've come up with is a line that says, yeah, but we're not actually going to apply it. We'll look on a case-by-case basis and we'll fudge it that way. Where that allows you to maintain your principles, but has the huge risk that the planning inspector just says, no, I don't like that. But I come back to this question of, should we be consulting on this? And we've got a gun to our heads because of the 31st of December. Well, I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen. You've been riding this train for 3 years. And you've known for some considerable time, A, about the standard method, and B, about the deadline. But that's all at a strategic level. But I want to bring this back to the level that residents will understand. And I'm going to be parochial about this. I'm going to talk about Bidford-on-Avon. And no, I'm not going to make big play about the stupid increase in numbers of now 3,600 additional homes that'll make Bidford-on-Avon about 50% larger than Ulster by the time we've finished with this mess. We learned that there are challenges with viability. And now we've come up with the rules of 4 viability zones, A, B, C and D across Stratford district area of across the whole area of plan. And lo and behold, do you know what? Bidford-on-Avon is in Zone D, which the policy position therefore is 0 affordable housing. It's not viable to provide anything. And as Bill Fleming, my fellow district councillor, said to me last night, well, that's every kid in Bidford-on-Avon screwed for the next 25 years then to find somewhere they can afford to live. And you're going to tell me that that is not such a significant issue that it should not be consulted upon by the people. That's just one example. You have now got to a position where pretty much everybody except those who are in the driving seat about this plan is against it. We are not natural bedfellows. The Greens at Stratford District Council are not natural bedfellows with Conservatism and reform. But you have contrived to get to a position where we cannot see that this plan is deliverable, is viable. And there is some logic in the argument that says, yeah, get it over the line, lads, by the end of the year. Don't really matter if the planning inspector kicks it into touch, as long as that happens after May next year. It is not difficult to draw that conclusion from Councillor Wally Hoggins. But you are trying to convince everybody that none of this now needs further consultation and you've got to go with the 31st of December. You're going to, and I know you're going to come back and say viability changes over a while and we can do this. Tell that to the developers over at least the next 5 years, okay? You are dooming my residents to be completely unable to afford to find anywhere to live in the place that they were born and brought up in. And if you think that's a great plan, I started this process off. That's not what I signed up for. So I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It's a difficult one, but you've got to a position where you've been told this ain't going to pass muster. You just got to swallow it, go back to the public, and then go around the houses on Regulation 19 again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that you did start this process in 2021. Thank you very much. We've now got the any other councillors that want to come in and speak at this point. Otherwise, I've got group leaders. If anybody, we have group leaders. Which group leaders? We've already had 2 group leaders speak. And Councillor Bode from Warwick District Council.
Thank you. It's been an interesting discussion. I've learned a lot about Stratford, not a lot about the Warwick District as part of the plan. However, we look at see what we're going to do potentially. What are the issues? And we have had warning coming across. Infrastructure. Lots of people who spoke here said, what guarantee have we got that we'll get the infrastructure? Well, probably not a lot. And certainly if I look in my area, in North Leamington, where the infrastructure of getting people across the town hasn't been resolved, hasn't been looked at, are there infrastructure changes? Don't know, but it's certainly something we can't support without a solution. We then look at viability. It was interesting this morning on Radio 4. They were talking to developer representatives about viability and what impact that has on them. And the argument is viability. The longer we leave it, the more expensive the materials become. And that's where they're getting out of step. And what's the answer from the developer viewpoint? Well, we're already doing it. We won't build. We will wait. Now, if that's the case and they will wait, this talk and threat about the 5-year land supply, we know we don't control that. We can give the planning permissions and areas of where it's going to be, but if there's no return on the investment from the developer, they'll just sit on it. So within the first year, your 5-year land supply has been shot. And certainly the way things are going with the price of materials and the lack of labour, lack of ability to build, that is a serious consideration. We look at the plans that have come forward and we're looking at affordable homes. So where we thought it was straightforward, grey belt 50% affordable, green belt 40% affordable. Oh no, we had to change that. And depending on where you are, and we've already heard tonight, that I think it was Bidford, that you won't get any affordable homes. So we're not supplying the need which the government claims to have identified as an issue. We can't meet it. We then move on to net zero. Warwick District has quite a high net zero standard, could be higher. What's the government say? Well, sorry, if it's not within building regs, you can't do it. And so we're not only not providing houses for people, we're not meeting our climate change needs. So it's a difficult plan. We can all recognise where the numbers have come from. It's come from the government, and it's fairly and squarely in the Labour Party's gift of these numbers, and that's where they've all come from, and the obligations that we're having to meet to actually deliver. And what we end up with is a plan that we have now with big holes in it. We've had advice from the Planning Inspectorate and PIMS that there are a number of things that we need to do, otherwise it won't fly. And I think the only way you can deal with all those things that need looking at is to actually pause the consultation, and that's a decision that you will make sometime tonight. But pause the consultation, but you do need to know what's the drop dead date of actually putting something in. And I think that's important, to actually set the parameters out and see how far we can get to having an acceptable plan, if at all.
And anybody else? Councillor Day, do you want to? Councillor Falk.
Thank you. I came late into this discussions, so I've only probably been on about 6 months, and I'm just going to say thank yous. So thank yous. Thank you to the councillors who, 5 years have been working on this. Thank you to the officers, through personal upsets, and long hours that have presented us with a plan. Whether we're going to agree it or not is another matter, and it's not my decision tonight, it's Cabinet's, it'll be my decision to vote next week. The only thing that hasn't been mentioned tonight, apart from about affordable housing in Bidford, my aim always is homes for people. I spend a big part of my life trying to find homes for people, mainly social housing. So my only disappointment, I think, now is the fact that we may not get homes, affordable homes in certain sites. Because people need homes. People want to live in South Warwickshire because it's a nice place to live, really nice place to live. But my children are lucky, have got homes. I'm not sure my grandchildren will be able to afford to live in Warwickshire, because not South Warwickshire, because it's too expensive. So a plan has got to give us the opportunity for our children to carry on living in this area. And I'm not sure at the moment this one will. But, please think about homes. I'm lucky I live in Whitnash and we've got no land left. We've all been built out, apart from on our playing fields. So, we're not going to suffer too much with this plan because we already have the last 2 we've got no homes left. We join in with Warwick, Leamington, you know, because we're joined together now, we have no village left. We're now a small town surrounded by 3 large towns. But I've swallowed it and put up with it because there's homes for my children to live in my area. So please just keep in your mind, we do need homes. It's just at what cost and who's going to be able to afford to live in them. But thank you, everybody who's been involved up to now.
Okay. Councillor Day.
Chair, thank you. I've managed to master the technology. Firstly, I'm the leader of the Warwick District Council Conservative Group, and I was the leader of the District Council at the time we initiated a joint working with Stratford District Council on this plan. And I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that's been done by successive cabinets and portfolio holders to get us to this point. I have to also credit and second Councillor Phelps' vote of thanks to our officers. This has been a Herculean effort, and having served for many of those years on the advisory group, I've also seen in the sort of detail we've been taken through. I don't believe our residents have had the benefit of understanding that or giving that information to them, and that is something I think we need to pick up. But if you excuse that preamble, I hope it's helpful too just to register that I'm now one of 2 ward councillors in Bishop's Tatchbrook. One of the first things I had to do as a new councillor when I was elected was actually support my group and vote through, because we were in administration then, the local plan at the time. That requires, in my ward, a new family to be welcomed every day for 10 years. We started with a village of 750 dwellings. It has been a very tough 10 years to serve as a district councillor whilst all that has happened. But I've seen it as my responsibility. I'm now joined by another ward councillor, of course, who shares this, to make sure we win the benefits that come with a good local plan. And we have seen infrastructure invested, which has been significant and has been broadly welcomed by our community. So my point here, Chair, is that a new local plan, it does not mark the end of a process, but the beginning. The benefits too of a good and well-functioning local plan also relate to the delivery of infrastructure, whether it be roads, although I'm probably least interested in that, country parks, that we've got. We've got a brand new secondary school we didn't expect. We also got our first village hall. Remember, this is a doomsday village registered that didn't even have a village hall and wouldn't have had one if not for the plan. But in facing COVID, Chair, the other thing across Warwick District that we benefited from was because we had a local plan, we were able to forward fund the building of our affordable houses, which kept construction companies on sites and mean that we were able to deliver a 40% affordable housing requirement, so that people's families in my little rural village could have their children living in the same community that they live in, and the priority was given to them. There have been many, many benefits to the local plan, and I want to underscore that as you deliberate as joint cabinets tonight. But let's put aside these points of local focus and understand that this plan is you have far less discretion than we had when the 2017 plan came into power in Warwick District. Government, this Labour government in particular, is hell-bent on destroying our greenbelt. Through definitions such as grey belt and all the nebulous way in which that has been put to us, and any autonomy we have over housing numbers is illusionary, in my view. And the requirements yet to fund our infrastructure are not being funded and being given to us by government. We are, I believe, as local authorities, both of us, working very hard and very diligently to get the best outcome we can within a restricted time frame, also imposed on us by government. So I just wish residents would appreciate, and I hope this has been conveyed to the 200 plus who've written to you, Chair, that we are doing the very best with some excellent officers within some much tighter constraints than we've operated in the past. There have been some real achievements as well around the green initiatives, around the net zero carbon DPD in Warwick, which was and we have officers who've led that admirably. One of the an ice-breaking, a leading policy, which I think, as a Conservative administration, won support from across the whole of Warwick District Council at the time, and we're pleased to see that being taken up as part of this new plan in various formats. This is, and I would speak from experience, for cabinet members here present that are going to take these decisions tonight, this will probably be the biggest political part of your legacy as councillors, and those many, many years of service being distilled here. And so please weigh up, and I know you are, these decisions very, very carefully. It's important that when we come together as separate councils and make this resolution or not to proceed with Regulation 19, that councillors have had adequate time and opportunity to understand that. And if I may, Chair, my one concern, and I've expressed this to our leader, is that we are taking this too quickly. I appreciate the deadline, but to meet, in Warwick's case, next on Monday for all councillors, when we are, in fact, I believe, facing tonight changes to the proposals for Regulation 19 and possibly to some of the elements of the plan, is too short a notice and makes a mockery of our local democracy. Now, I know time is tight. There is a goodwill across all our groups. Let's get this right and let the democratic process run its course. Thank you, Chair. And
Councillor Davison, as the group leader for, you are the group leader for Labour, and you're standing in for the group leader for Labour. You're all right on, okay, Councillor Davison.
Yeah, okay, I can start now. I was going to go later, but
it's entirely up to you. If you'd like
I'll
to take part in the main
Yeah.
debate. In which case, I'll just wind up as leader, one leader, and then we can go to the wider debate. I'll ask the officers to feed back some of the questions, some of the answers to the points that people have raised. Just to make it clear that I'd like to be able to place on record my thanks to the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group, and Judith Hitfeld took over as chair fairly late in that day, but Councillor Day was chair for a long time before, and Councillor Rock before that. I also came in, I think in the last month or so, as co-chair to that group. But the actual group, which includes ward councillors from both districts, has met regularly since early 2021 to provide a forum for emergency evidence to be reviewed and for policies and allocations to be discussed. It had no decision-making powers, but it did actually form a valuable sounding board, and I know that there have been people from all the political parties have been on that advisory group. It's met 60 times since early 2021, and I think it deserves our thanks for the dedication and the kind of work that went on, in that role. So I'd like to kind of, just say that as well. And then we'll have a bit more of a debate. Councillor Waddy-Hoggins, do you want to come in at this point?
Point of order. Reform UK haven't been on any consultation groups. Thank you.
I don't think you existed in 2021. That's the problem.
You said from 2021. Thank you.
And from 2021, yes. I think there must have been a reason, but anyway, it wasn't part of the. Councillor Pemberton, is this something that you really want to raise at this point, or rather than?
Okay. Just a very quick one. I did forget myself right at the very beginning, and I omitted to thank each and every one of the officers and members, because regardless of where I think we are, I cannot fault the commitment, the hard work, and the thinking that's gone into this thing across all officers from both authorities, and for the dedication of members who've been at various groups. It would be remiss of me not to have, it was remiss of me not to have said that right to the get-go. Sometimes passion gets the better of me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much indeed, and that is appreciated, because I also want to be able to add my thanks to the considerable amount of work that has gone on over many, many years. Next, I would like to ask the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny to be able to report on the reports that, I don't know whether the Overview and Scrutiny from Warwick is here, but certainly the Overview, okay. Would you both like to report on the outcomes from the Overview and Scrutiny committees? Which one will go first? Stratford? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps I should just say, for the sake of the public, to explain exactly what the OSC, in our case, as we refer to it, actually is. Our role is, as a committee of councillors, is to act as the critical friend to the Cabinet. In other words, we are there to review what decisions the Cabinet has taken or is about to take, and to offer pearls of wisdom, in fact, which they can either ignore or whatever. But we do it on the basis we are a critical friend. In the case of Stratford, our committee is made up of 12 councillors, and those councillors reflect the balance within the council as a whole in terms of political balance. I hope that brief explanation is of some interest. The Stratford OSC committee met yesterday. We have, through the good offices of Mr. Howard Allison, we already have a draft minute of that meeting, of the discussion. It extends to 5.5 pages. You'll be pleased to know I do not intend to make reference to it, but it is a public record. The document is available. I'll just try and deal with the themes. The question that the Joint Cabinet Committee has to fundamentally answer, if this plan is to go for consultation under Regulation 19, is that they have to believe that the plan is both viable and deliverable. Viable is a necessary condition. If it's not viable, it can't be delivered. So it's a two-leg test that they have to satisfy themselves upon. The discussion that we had yesterday was based upon asking councillors to put themselves in the position of being on the Joint Cabinet Committee and reviewing the 700 and odd pages, in effect, and exercise their own judgment and why they'd come to that judgment about whether they would vote for proceeding to Regulation 19 stage or not. So the points I'd like to make are, we were I think the committee was very unhappy with the timetable of the meeting itself. The addendum to which reference has been made was available, was emailed to members of the committee, amongst others, at 9:20 on the morning of the meeting, which was due to start at 10 o'clock. I understand there are practical reasons why that was the case, but it left the committee in the position where it had scant opportunity, really, to give serious consideration, and certainly had scant opportunity for considered thought over a period of time in order to assess the information that addendum presented. The committee's discussions concluded with a wide range of views. At one end of the spectrum was the view that was expressed that, I think it would be accurate to say, I think the words were actually used, this was all a waste of time. The shortcomings as that particular councillor felt was so great that that advice would have been that this was not a plan that should go forward for consultation. There were others at the other extreme of the spectrum of opinion who thought that the plan, although there may be criticisms of it, was essentially sound in their view to proceed to viability and deliverability tests. Equally, there were a lot of a good proportion of the councillors who were somewhere in between those two ends of the spectrum. There were concerns about the concerns that the inspector had raised in response to the visit that he had paid and the discussions that had been had. That gave rise to the concern that whether the concerns that had been expressed could actually be effectively addressed by making some revisions to the plans, adjustments of one sort or another. That gave rise to a further concern, which was that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee would want to feel that it had the opportunity to scrutinise whatever ends up as being the adjusted plan in detail. There was a need to feel that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee had, or will have, may have, depending on decisions, full opportunity to play its part and review in order that it can give its advice and opinion. There was some concern about whether the question of infrastructure. We've heard tonight from resident speakers casting doubt on whether infrastructure will actually follow with development or precede development. That sense of concern was shared, and I think that would be fairly accurate to say that was shared across the members of the OSC. It wasn't limited to a small number. The plan also, there has to be the second, perhaps the most serious one, and again, it's already been mentioned by residents who've spoken, which is the question of the Relief Road, the Stratford Relief Road. The plan depends crucially in terms of delivery of houses as proposed upon the delivery of that road. One of the speakers referred to a back of the fag packet envelope calculation. Whilst we understand that there are discussions which have gone on, are going on, thought has been given to how this might be financed, it nevertheless results in the question, how will where will the money come from? How will the council's finances be affected? What, if any, are the implications for residents in terms of payments expected from them? So the conclusion we came to was that, going around the table, I judged that there was strong opposition, but equally there was strong support. But the balance lay just, I suspect, and my calculation, my assumption would be on the balance of approximately 60 in favour, 40% against. It was that sort of, in that sort of order of proportion. There was, I think the significant thing is the degree to which there was either outright opposition or scepticism, despite the fact that there was a majority view, I think, that it should proceed. Perhaps I should mention that one of the benefits that we had was that, of our meeting, was that all three members of the Stratford District Council, who are members of the Joint Committee, were at our discussion throughout, and whatever the shortcomings and the brevity of my report, residents and councillors can rest assured that every word was heard by those people who are going to have to make the decision. The bottom line is that on the balance of probabilities, so to speak, the OSC was, in its discussions were in favour of proceeding to the next stage of consultation. But the big question I would have on behalf of the committee is that if that is to happen, the OSC in Stratford would expect to see an opportunity for further scrutiny of whatever the final terms of the plan turn out to be. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. And we have the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny, Councillor Milton, also from Warwick District Council. Would you also like to add? And then I'm suggesting after Councillor Milton has said his piece that we have a comfort break, but I'll come back to that after you've spoken.
Great. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Councillor Harvey for giving such a good explanation of the role of Overview and Scrutiny Committees. There are a couple of things that we do slightly different in Warwick District. Firstly, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee isn't actually done on political balance. We have actually a majority of opposition councillors on the committee. That's how it's weighted. The other thing that we've done as well is we haven't taken a view on whether the plan should go forward to consultation or not. That's a decision for council to make. But we have made a number of recommendations and comments on both what is set out in the papers and beyond that as well. Our meeting this week went on for 6 hours across 2 evenings. The other difference that members should note as well is that at Warwick District, we don't have air conditioning in the town hall. Tuesday evening in particular was rather warm. But so we dealt with it. We dealt with it through a number of different areas and we tried to cope with it thematically. We did start with the addendum, which has already been referred to, and committee made a number of recommendations about the addendum. Firstly, that officers should provide, and by Friday, which is tomorrow, a comparison of existing standards versus the proposed plan in respect of net zero DPD and biodiversity net gain and affordable housing, and where councillors realistically do and don't have a choice about those things. That also clarity is provided on when the Regulation 19 consultation should take place, but if it is delayed, when is the latest date at which it needs to start to achieve an on-time submission? And by on-time, we mean end of December. Recommendation 5.1.2 of the addendum should specifically be revised to reference that the viability assessment will be considered by the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group, and that secondly, that the viability assessment should be shared with all councillors, and that any significant changes as a result of the ongoing work should come back to council for consideration. And then recommendation 5.1.1d of the addendum should be amended to remove the reference to net zero carbon target, as we don't think those should be qualified. So we also commented that we expressed disappointment about the biodiversity net gain reduction to 10%, but noted that this was a national decision. And we also noted that viability is an assessment at a point of time, and it will be reassessed as the plan goes forward. So that was the addendum dealt with. Now on to the main act. Strategic allocations and the strategy for those. Our recommendations to Joint Cabinet were that an additional recommendation be added to the report that the councils recognise that the housing numbers are set nationally by government, and that the council is required to deliver a sound plan for those numbers, and that a further review of the non-strategic sites in the plan should be conducted to determine which sites may pose more risk to the soundness by including them rather than excluding them. And we also commented on this point that the Joint Cabinet should explore the relative density levels in the local plan to look at the potential to increase density where appropriate rather than setting a blanket standard. The way that the plan is created may also lead to concerns that residents' voices have not been heard and that more work needs to be done to assure residents on the actions that have been taken as a result of previous consultations. All councillors were also reminded to take a review before their respective council meetings of the following documents, which I won't list, but there are 5 of them. There are around 100 or even more technical documents as well, but there were a number of key ones that committee felt were important that should be reviewed before councils meet next week and the week after. We also talked about the process that should be followed. Committee had a significant amount of documents to read before taking a decision, but there were a number of pre-meeting questions that hadn't been responded to. Committee were of the review that those questions need to be responded to by officers before Council next Monday, and that's the Warwick District Council meeting next Monday. We also noted that there are some mismatches within documents that are not enough for the plan to be unsound, but do need to be corrected before submission. And we would like to see a timeline and next steps for the delivery of the local plan and supporting documents to the submission stage. We discussed transport in some detail for Warwick District. We were concerned about the quality and detail of the strategic transport analysis. Based on this being Regulation 19 consultation stage, and for this reason, the committee requested for them to see the strategic transport analysis in an updated draft form as soon as it is available. The committee also had concerns that by putting forward schemes, some of which may be unnecessary road schemes, it makes them too certain, and the committee would like flexibility about how these come forward over the life of the plan, in recognising that the infrastructure delivery plan is actually a living document. We'd also advise the Joint Cabinet to see the timeline requested previously, including the continued work on the strategic transport analysis and when that should be completed by. In terms of other strategic infrastructure, we spent some time talking about the green belt, as you'd imagine, and the committee made a specific comment that the plan needs to clarify its position on infrastructure and non-strategic sites. And sorry, on the green belt issue, we would like there is a glossary which doesn't currently include the definition of grey belt as set out within the NPPF, and that needs rectifying. We then closed with some general comments, and the committee noted that there were 150 pre-meeting questions submitted by members, an addendum and an addendum to the addendum from officers. The committee thanked all the officers and the members of the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group for their work to date on local plan and the development manager, date on the local plan, the development manager, head of place arts and economy, and the head of the local plan for their attendance at both meetings and responding to over 6 hours of questions from the committee. But finally, the committee would like to highlight the challenges in attempting to scrutinise such a large number of papers and such a significant project. These were challenges that were foreseen by members from the outset, and we were disappointed that we've not been able to access papers earlier to enable an effective scrutiny process. Those were the comments and recommendations from Warwick District Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you very much indeed. And before, would the officers just like to come in and address some of those issues, and then I will call for a break, for a comfort break for everybody that for a while I will decide exactly how long. But John Kefford, would you like to address the councillor and also other comments that have been made?
Thank you, Chair, and perhaps if I start, perhaps other colleagues might want to add anything that I miss. Perhaps if I just start in response to Councillor Wally-Hoggins and Councillor Pemberton. I disagree that the inspector raised 33 serious matters. There were some helpful recommendations. It will be a different inspector who examines the plan. But there were 3 key risks, and those 3 key risks are consistent with risks that officers have previously identified, including the Joint Committee regarding timetable. The 3 risks being viability, headroom, and the trajectory. The addendums that have been published seek to resolve those issues. So taken together, the plan as published, Appendix 1, plus the addendums, are considered to be a sound plan, and that's what we are consulting on. So just for the avoidance of doubt and absolute clarity, the addendums and the changes are being consulted on, or subject to the decisions at this committee and at council, will be consulted on under the Reg 19 consultation. So that's being done full transparency. The recommendations just to finalise the technical studies, that's standard recommendation, but that's relating solely to the technical studies. It's not relating to the policy outcomes that result from those studies. They will be determined by councils. The delegation's not about making those policy decisions. If we can just touch upon the comments made by residents and certainly some impassioned and cogent arguments, and I just want to thank residents for engaging in the plan, particularly because it is a very complex process in any event. Just to start with some general points, wherever we build homes, there will be urbanisation, there will be a loss of countryside and loss of rurality. I don't think anyone really wants their communities to change because it's a loss of what is familiar. But our communities do change, they have to change. And I'll make the point slightly flippantly, but I'm sure all of our homes were on green fields once. Turning to some specific points, just to address some of those that were made. The 20-minute neighbourhoods, it's about access to those daily services, appreciating that certain services such as A&E will always be much further away. The 10,000 homes includes the 3,500 homes already identified in the core strategy at Long Marston, so that's not an additional figure, it's within the core strategy figure. The reason we're going beyond 2050, not just Long Marston but some other sites as well, is it's about having that, creating that baseline, that threshold of a community that can maximise the ability to provide the infrastructure. A bigger community, you'll get more infrastructure and you'll get more cohesion and internalisation. So that's the rationale of going big rather than limiting it to just 4,500 homes. I did say that we can't use the plan to rectify existing deficiencies, and that's true per se. But what we can do is use the plan to bring in additional benefits, and that's the case with the relief road. There's an additional benefit of having that bypass the relief road to Stratford, but at the same time it's got to address the issues, the impacts that are also raised by the development itself. In terms of other new settlement locations, we had a question about what came in, I think, third, fourth and fifth, and I don't think in any particular order, but we had Bearley, Wilmcote and Dansey in Stratford district and Kingswood in Warwick district. So they were the other three locations. But ultimately, it does come down to choices, and some of the speakers identified those issues about the specifics of choosing Long Marston. On balance, we feel Long Marston south of Stratford are appropriate, and that's also in the context of a lack of credible alternatives elsewhere. The easy option for development, and this is why developers love this approach, is dispersal, where you build perhaps 150, 300, 500 homes in lots of villages all over the place. But it's very, very difficult to provide the infrastructure to support that growth. And we've suffered from that in the past, certainly in Stratford district, where you don't get that quantum to justify new provision. You keep having to expand existing facilities. And I think it's fair to say in all the conversations we've had with residents, communities, parish councillors, members and infrastructure providers, the general consensus is that we have sweated the assets. We need a plan that delivers something new. It draws a new baseline, and that's what this plan is trying to do. It is challenging, it is difficult, but if we can't do that through the plan, then we're not going to do it through any other means. And I think lastly, if I may, we had reference to the 5 principles that have steered our approach, but they are in the context of development. They cannot be read in isolation. They are in the context of having to provide over 1,100 homes per year, every year. And that's the challenge we're facing, and that's the challenge that members have. And as I said at the outset, it does require some very difficult decisions, but they're decisions we do need to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm proposing that we'll take 20-minute break. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark, not Councillor Clark, my apology. Warwick District Council, Philip Clark also wants to come in because obviously this is a joint plan between the two councils. My apologies.
There you go. So, can you all hear me at the back? Yeah, thank you. So my name's Philip Clark. I'm the Head of Place Arts and Economy, Head of Planning at Warwick District. So I'm Mr Careford's opposite number at Warwick. Just really wanted to make a few points, very much to endorse what Mr Careford said. This local plan is a challenging local plan. It's been prepared in very challenging times for councillors and officers. We've had at least two major planning acts, one from the previous Conservative government and another one from the current Labour government, which have impacted how we have to look at things. We've had at least three, probably more because I haven't counted, versions of the National Planning Policy Framework, which we have to respond to at all times. We did have a standard method for calculating housing under the previous government. We had that changed under the new government, and it came at a particularly challenging time because we were trying to agree our preferred options, if councillors remember. And literally, I think it was the week or the day we were trying to agree it, those new figures were confirmed, yes. So it has been very challenging, and I would just endorse Mr Careford's point that firstly, that it's much better to have a plan than not to have a plan, even if it's a plan that you struggle to be entirely comfortable with. And the second is that the development will come our way regardless of whether there's a plan. And we do need to be very mindful of the need to meet our housing needs, and whatever we may feel about what those local needs are, they are set by the standard method, which is applied. It's an arithmetic approach with some allowance for affordability, which is different for each district, but it's applied across the country. So we're all in that position. And I think somebody referred to the number, I think it was Mr Careford, the number of councils that, like both Warwick and Stratford, don't currently have a 5-year supply of housing land. Well, I think it is about half, and that's largely a reason for it. Now, against that background, we did want, and we had a very clear steer from members from the very beginning, that they wanted to be ambitious with this plan. They wanted to be ambitious in terms of the climate emergency, which both councils had declared a year or so before we started work on the plan. And so issues like biodiversity net gain and the net zero standards, and I think it was Councillor Day who referred to the work that Warwick has done, and we've got a net zero carbon DPD, which has been really important for us. We've had it adopted just over 2 years now, so and that applies to all residential and many other applications that come through. So that's been really helpful, and I know Stratford were very keen that we all learn the lessons from that and try to do the best we can. And then the other area where we were challenged to be ambitious about was infrastructure. And I'm looking at Councillor Coucher. We've had many conversations about infrastructure. And it's about, and there are two things, it's about the right type of infrastructure, but delivered at the right time. And so we've tried to do that. So maybe the plan has been quite ambitious in what we are trying to achieve. And I would just again endorse the point that I think a number of people have made, that when it comes to delivering that infrastructure, the district councils are only one player. We're not the education authority, the highway authority, the health authority. We have to work with those to try to deliver the best solution and to provide those opportunities. And that brings me to my final point, which is just about viability. We were ambitious. The evidence, and we apologise that it came so late, but it's the nature of the process that it's only when you bring all the constituent elements of the plan together that you can fully understand the viability of them. We did have some viability challenges. It is a requirement that when we submit a plan, it is, in our view, viable at the point of submission. That viability will, of course, be tested at examination. But if we come with a plan that we cannot evidence, and that would be from an independent expert who would vouch it, it's not just us saying it, then we will fall at the first hurdle of any examination. We received some disappointing, but perhaps not surprising, and Councillor Bode referred to that interview with the developer on the Radio 4 this morning. I heard that same interview and had that same thought. We got some challenging advice around viability, and as Mr. Careford said, as officers we've tried to, at pace, but I tried to respond to that and find a way through with a plan that could be taken forward for consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I echo as somebody that's kind of never been a planner, but have been involved in other aspects of what local government has done in net zero climate change and renewables, etc. I mean, for example, we waited 10 years for a future home strategy, and then suddenly it comes, and you have to take it on board. It's you know, all the way through the local plan until relatively recently, you hadn't got that standard, or the building regulations weren't confirmed, but now they're there. So anyway, thank you very much for both officers and for all the teams that have put so much work in. I'm going to have a 20-minute break, but then we as a joint committee then have to be able to come to a resolution and a set of recommendations. I don't expect that one to take so long because the major part of this discussion has been about hearing everybody's point of view. So thank you very much indeed. Let's have a 20-minute break. Okay. All right. Well, now it's up to the joint committee to have their input. I'm going to ask for Councillor Chilvers to give a little bit of preamble, Councillor Coles if you want to kind of say anything, and then the two other committee members, Councillor Davison and then Councillor Coucher. And then we'll see where we go from there and then maybe get some other conversations going after that. Councillor Chilver.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for all the speakers we've heard this evening as well. Excuse me, I just want to cover a couple of big picture things. And again, just to emphasise that the huge number of properties to be built is almost entirely determined by central government. And of course, we do need some new properties and they need to be affordable, but the numbers the government are forcing us to build is ridiculous. But we're caught in that bind. If we don't allocate sites, developers will be able to pick and choose any bit of the countryside, and that will just create even more chaos in our communities. I regularly walk through a number of the beautiful countryside sites that are due to be allocated, and it's just heartbreaking to think of them being concreted over. And as one of the speakers earlier said, once we lose those natural habitats, once we lose those green spaces, we never get them back. And therefore, I kind of see it as my duty as a councillor to minimise the number of sites that we do have to put forward. And that's why you'll see me this evening supporting increasing the density and the numbers that we have on sites that we do have to put forward, so that we can at least take some sites out and protect some of our countryside. The second point I want to make is about the strategic transport assessment. This makes an initial assessment of the number of trips that will be generated by all the new houses, but has produced a huge catalogue of road widenings, junction widenings, roundabout widenings. But it only says that some of that may be needed. But unfortunately, what we've ended up at the moment with the plan is that that kind of catalogue has been sort of moved wholesale into the plan itself, where it says developers will be then expected to deliver that. And then that's hard baking in car dependencies and associated traffic jams, noise and air pollution that some of the speakers have mentioned, despite that we're meant to be doing a plan putting active and public transport first. And so I do want to see that changed. There is opportunity to do that. The STA is only in that initial stage. It hasn't looked yet at the busiest bus route in the county, for instance, the A452, A46 Leamington to University to Coventry, nor is it yet considered that the impact that genuine 20-minute neighbourhoods could have, having schools, shops, GPs nearby that can reduce the number of trips on the wider network. So I do think we need to take time to address taking out sites, to address the transport infrastructure, and also to look at the viability issues that have come so late onto our table. And so I do want to see a short delay. I don't think we're yet ready to go up to Reg 19, but we do need intense work to get the best possible plan to submit by the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, would you like to just say a few words as well?
Thank you, Chair. I want to join with all my colleagues again to thank all those who have been involved, and also I'm fully aware of the amount of work that officers have had to deal with. This is a fairly representative sample of the regular quantities of paper that have crossed my desk. And I also actually wanted to thank both Overview and Scrutiny Committees for their recommendations to us and the advice they've given us and the things they think about. And I do think we ought to probably put something on note to congratulate them for their stamina as well. It has been an interesting experience being part of this. It is a very complex and a very difficult process. I've found it extraordinarily challenging. The decisions we were faced with and the realisation of how very much the decisions we take will affect the landscape of the district that we live in. But I think the thing that has helped me through this process and to keep working on it is the fact, as several of my colleagues have said already, whatever the plan we have, whatever we try to work out, not having a plan is worse. And I regularly, as I go around Stratford, I see the results of developments that have come in that haven't had the protection of the infrastructure planned, where they've been built, and I see the results when I talk to residents and I look around the built environment around me, where there was development without infrastructure planning and without a plan in place. And that has been one of the principal things that has driven me to make sure that we get the best possible plan we can in, which has been made by complex, even more difficult by laws changing and numbers changing. And that is simply the thing that has driven me, that I know we have to get something in plan to protect the environment and the buildings and the lives of our residents, not only now, but going forward for so very many years. And so I thank our colleagues for their input and the officers for their work. And I would just like to reassure people that I'm always mindful of that responsibility that I have to them and their families and the future of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat lots of brilliant stuff said from the public speakers, lots of councillors. Just pick out one or two things. There is actually quite a lot we should be pleased about in the plan. The 20-minute neighbourhoods is doing what we can to make communities that reduce congestion, and if there's higher density in the centres, reduce the number of fields that need to be built on. However, it's hugely challenging, as has been said already. The numbers, and I say they're crazy numbers, they're fantasy numbers, cannot be built, but they are government asking us to provide land for that number. What we have to do is find the least worst options, because usually nobody wants the sites by them, and use sufficient evidence. There's an enormous amount of evidence. I know people say, well, you need more, you need to do this, back of a fag packet and so on, but we could do that forever and we wouldn't get where we want to on that. However, I'll just say one more bit as well. Quite a few have talked about cross-party working. And I actually remember Councillor Pemberton, when I was a newbie, asking awkward questions about 5 years ago. He'd ring me up afterwards and say, what did you mean? Are you all right? And so that sort of engagement I really welcome, and so thank you, Councillor, for that. As Councillor Day said, we are working hard to get the best outcome. It won't be perfect, there is no magic wand, but we're doing what we can. What I would like to do, Chair, is propose a number of amendments to the recommendations. There are quite a lot, so I'm sure you don't want me to speak to them all in one go. They need to be said and recorded. It is a bit complicated. Since about 5 this morning, I've gone through about 20 versions of them, partly because we've heard a lot of the issues. I was in the 6 hours of the ONS, and Councillor Milton provided the summary to us almost straight away, so been looking at that. We've had some ideas of our own. And also, of course, there was recommendations in the addendum that came in as well. So that was an add-on. So what I've got is what I think is a reasonable combination of all of them. I think if you're happy, I will read them out. So I'm asking Joint Cabinet whether them as they stand will replace the other, what we have, and it will be to go to the 2 full councils to consider. However, before I start, one of the big bits is I agree that it is being rushed. We do have the deadline, end of December. I agree with that. I don't agree with people who say, forget that. But I think there's a little bit of time, so there will be a delay, or that's what I'm proposing, that there is a delay, which would mean we have the full councils next week. We're charging officers to do a huge amount of work in just a few weeks, maybe for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and come back again. It won't be perfect, but we hope some of the issues that have been raised have been resolved. And as I go through, you'll see which are the key ones.
And if you don't mind me saying, the final decision makers are the 2 councils. We are, so just for members of the public, the final decision about the detail will be made by the councils.
Yes. So I'll go through the recommendations. The first one's a new one. It stems from something raised at our scrutiny committee. and that it's to note that the large number of properties to be built over the plan period is almost completely determined by central government, not by local authorities. That both councils are highly sceptical of the methodology, reasons and levels of certainty used to determine the number of houses we are required to allocate. So that's recommendation 1.
Okay. Anybody want to make a comment, or should I just kind of take them all together? But people note that one recommendation. Okay.
The second one was as it was in the paper, but it says, notwithstanding the above recommendation, note the importance of having sound, up-to-date local plan to prevent the uncoordinated delivery of potentially less favourable sites for development and maximise the delivery of infrastructure to support development, noting also the particular importance of this given that neither district council can demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that would be uncontroversial because it's the same. That I will read them out just so we've got the full thing, but the next one is identical, no change. Note the importance of submitting a local plan to the Secretary of State by 31st of December 2026 in light of the government's declared intention that local plans prepared under current regulations cannot be submitted after that time. Moving on to the next one, which is still identical to before, endorse the extensive work that has been undertaken by officers and councillors to prepare the South Warwickshire local plan and the previous public consultations that have been undertaken on it, and note that further work on plan viability is underway, which will be presented as an addendum to this report. That's true, although now the next is the big one, which may be best to take in turns because it is, the first bit is temporarily delay consideration of the publication draft South Warwickshire Local Plan Appendix 1 together with Appendices 2 to 7 and the supporting evidence base, in brackets together the proposed submission documents, for a minimum, which is a new word, 6-week public consultation period for representations in accordance with Regulation 19 of the Town and Country Planning Act, Local Planning England, Regulation 2012, subject to the other council also approving these documents. So that bit is just saying suspend. The word minimum is because, as you'll find out later, if it's over the summer holidays, it is felt that we want to give people the opportunity we can to respond.
Councillor, are you happy to respond to all of this, or is there any particular thing that you want to respond to at this? Okay.
I think it'd be useful to deal with that particular point because I think that's quite different from where we have been. I think in Stratford we're probably more prepared to go ahead with consultation in June, but appreciate that colleagues in Warwick still have further things that they need to test and work out, and indeed actually a further delay from our point of view will also be helpful because we in Stratford district at the moment have planning applications in for 10,000 houses across this district. And obviously with a 5-year housing land supply deficit, we are hugely vulnerable to many of those being granted on appeal. And it will allow us, I think, to determine which of those we might wish to support and which those we will definitely be wanting to try and stop. And if we are supporting sites which are in addition to what is in the South Warwickshire plan, those numbers could be netted off what is in the plan at the moment. So there is some advantages in having a slight delay. So I think I'm very happy to accept what Councillor Davison's just put forward.
That is a value that probably more affects Stratford more than Warwick is the sheer number of applications that are already coming in for planning. Carry on.
Okay, thank you. So in that delay, ask officers during this short delay to A, remove from the plan some of the worst performing sites in Warwick District, totalling between 1,500 and 2,000 homes.
That is a matter for Warwick District, but obviously because it's a joint plan, we do have to make sure that is
the plan remains viable. That's the most important thing.
Yes, I think it's fair to say officers do have concerns with that, and obviously there will be intense negotiation to see whether that can add up.
Yeah, I mean, the crucial thing is to make sure that we do get, meet the final deadline. Councillor Coucher.
And also there's equal treatment between both districts. Reduction in Warwick does not mean increase in Stratford.
Absolutely not. Okay. And anybody want to come in at that? Do you want to come in at that stage before Councillor Davison finishes? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Just to say, as officers, we would, and obviously I've shared this with Councillor Davison and other councillors, we would have some concerns about reducing the number of homes by that level. It is, as we've said, important, it's vital as a matter of soundness that when we submit the plan, we are, as a minimum, meeting the government's requirement. It is also good practice and something we would expect to be challenged on at the examination, that there is a degree of headroom, in other words, some contingency to recognise the fact that, forgive the pun, the best laid plans never quite go the way you intend them, and some sites may not come forward in quite the way you expect. So some headroom is good practice and is expected, and it is referred to in the letter from the planning inspector that we attached as the appendix to the first addendum to the report. The other point to make is that in taking sites out, particularly, I think the reference here is to the non-strategic sites. So by definition, they're the smaller ones. Well, not always, but usually the smaller ones. They are also, therefore, the ones that our housing trajectory would show are likely to come forward more quickly, which in turn will help us to achieve another thing which we have to be able to do, which is to demonstrate that on the day we adopt the local plan, we have a 5-year supply of housing land. And again, it's a test of soundness for the plan. Now, you'll see in the Appendix 1 to the main report, we produced the housing trajectory for both Warwick and Stratford districts. Warwick district showed that it could deliver a 5-year supply from the day of adoption. Stratford district could only do so if it did what's called a stepped trajectory. And a stepped trajectory is that you accept that in the early years of the plan you can't provide quite so many every year, but then in the later years of the plan you step up to a higher level. Now again, the inspector has cautioned very strongly against having either authority having a step trajectory, and indeed it was the reason for the second addendum which related to the release of further sites in Stratford district. But my concern about taking non-strategic sites in Warwick district out is if we got into a position where we ended up with having to have a stepped trajectory in Warwick, that would be a higher risk for the plan. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for making that clear. Would you like to continue?
I do. I'll just comment on that. I have listened to you, Phil Clark, so I've removed the word non-strategic out of it. So I'll remove it again, just so you're absolutely clear. It was removed from the plan some of the worst performing sites in Warwick district, totalling between 1,500 and 2,000 homes. The next two bits go with that. So part B is the capacities of the strategic growth locations in Warwick district are amended to the developers' numbers of dwellings. That is where the 2,000 homes comes from, because we're going on their numbers.
Yeah. Councillor Coucher, would you like to come on that point?
I think it would be quite helpful to have a range of numbers here. I think clearly, obviously, officers have proposed a series of numbers. I'm quite happy to take the developers' wishes, but I think we shouldn't be prescriptive on this at this stage. But I'd like John Careford's comment on that.
Comment, John Careford.
Thank you. So the plan needs flexibility. I think the application of a range, if it's moderate, is fine. So perhaps 50 homes here or there. But if you're looking at a range that could be, say, 500 homes, then that's quite challenging from a, I think from a soundness, because it doesn't really give certainty per se. So the local plan is, it's probably not as explicit as it needs to be and could be made more explicit. The numbers are expressed as minimums, and I think the way to address this would be to express the homes as minimum numbers based on the work of our own consultants. I'm just cautious of applying the developer assumptions because they may not always in every case lead to perhaps good planning outcomes, and it may be that they've got differences around the net developable area, so that's the actual area of the site you build on. Whereas, as has been suggested and highlighted, this plan is seeking to do good things in respect of provision of open space, green infrastructure, and so forth, ensure that we don't build on those areas that are prone to flooding. So we need to make sure that the sites, the capacities we think we can achieve can come forward in the right way. And there is a risk of over-reliance on higher numbers that could have consequences. So I think we need flexibility, but I think expressing numbers as a minimum is the best way to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I certainly, appreciate that being able to keep the infrastructure and get that infrastructure, particularly open spaces and decent homes, affordable homes. Councillor Coucher.
Can I suggest, rather than having a prescriptive arrangement here, clearly the additional time we're going to create ourselves is going to give time for more detailed consideration of each of the strategic sites, so we can actually refine the numbers associated with that. Certainly in Stratford District, we want to spend this additional time really refining how those strategic sites are going to come forward, and I think that will help us get a more definitive figure in relation to the house numbers.
Councillor Silver, do you want to come in, or do you want to let Councillor Davison continue and then come in?
Just briefly on this point. Yeah. Yeah. Just so in 2.6 of the addendum, it says it is recognised that these master planning figures represent a more cautious approach, and also that the South Warwickshire local plan will be encouraging site promoters to maximise delivery on sites, including by increasing density. So I think it's what we're looking for is that combination of input to maximise that delivery, and therefore we want to be looking above that minimum. What's minimum at the moment towards the upper end of that range.
Okay. Councillor Davison, do you want to continue?
No, well, I do, but I'd like to comment on two bits of this. First of all, thank you, officers, for responding to my question, which is in the pre-scrutiny questions, the very last table, which shows that for large sites in the current Warwick District local plan, there's actually very substantial increases in numbers when they actually come forwards. So I think they're being overcautious. The main bit here is how cautious do you want to be? Because if officers want to be assured that the local plan will be judged sound by the examiner, is they chuck in loads of houses, loads of sites. And okay, that means they've done their job and it's passed, but it's not great for residents because we're then getting far more sprawl, we're getting far more areas that have the issues with the development. So our view is that we need to be a little bit firm. We have to go with the minimum number, we accept that absolutely, but we don't have to be over cautious. The officers have been absolutely clear that the headroom is an advisory thing. It's not something you have to do. So are we prepared to push a little bit for the benefit of our residents?
Is that everything you want to say in your piece, or do you want to continue?
I will continue. So the next bit is, again, contentious with officers, and it's the same thing. included the same issue, include the expected number of non-local plan sites in the plan, as well as increasing the housing density on sites wherever possible. These changes are to provide headroom.
That's all, yeah. And do you have a seconder to those recommendations?
Oh, no. I've got lots more, but I thought you wanted to go them one at a time. Would you like me just to carry on going through
yes,
them?
please do.
Oh, okay then. It perhaps would benefit from explanation.
Is there any particular, do you want to respond at this stage to what has just been said?
Well, if I may, Chairman, sorry to cut across you, Councillor Davison. Yeah, I think, just to be clear, the concern about including sites that don't align with the strategy you're proposing does go to the heart of soundness. So we need to make sure members are clear about that. I think there's an opportunity, as Councillor Coucher has alluded, that there are some more sites that will come through, but we need to, if we're making assumptions around them, they need to align with the strategy we're proposing. You can't propose a plan and then also propose sites that don't accord with it. So just a note of caution on that point. And sorry, just on the headroom point very quickly, again, the advice from the advisory inspector was that our headroom was too low. So it's, I think, 3.6 for Stratford and 1.3% for Warwick. The officer's advice has been it needs to be around 10% at least. The inspector did identify or suggest there was one local plan he's worked on recently that had a 40% headroom in it. So I think just to put some context in that, the headroom is there to ensure that we deliver the plan and the plan succeeds. The smaller the amount of headroom, the more risk the plan has. Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you. As you know, Mr. Careford, I disagree strongly with that. The government standard numbers, if you add them up around the country, is 370,000 homes a year. If you add on that 10% that you say, that's 408,000. The average build rate over the last 20 years or so very, very rarely gets above 200,000. So it is not going to happen. It's not going to create all the houses you're wanting. If more sites are allocated above the minimum, it won't increase build-out rates. It just means developers will cherry pick, choosing sites without proper infrastructure. It weakens our focus on 20-minute neighbourhoods, which is the best aspect of the local plan. So my strong view is that we don't use these extra homes that we know are going to be built for the actual housing number, the standard number, because we know that's mandatory. But the extra, the headroom, which is advisory, is something we can use it for. So moving on to part D, reword in the main plan document all references to STA, Strategic Transport Assessment, derived road schemes, so that developers must contribute fully to the movement of people in line with the transport hierarchy, active travel, public transport, and then car. Part E, explore ways to address the viability issues, including meetings between the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group and viability consultants. F, to change the section on heritage assets to reflect the priority that needs to be given to tackle climate emergency by reducing heating bills. G, the primary focus for engaging with the viability consultant should be to increase the affordable housing requirements. Once done, any amendments are included within the respective policies of the South Warwickshire Local Plan. H, depending on the results of engaging with the viability consultants, a 10-year mix of affordable housing set out in policy H04 may be amended. I, the changes set out in paragraph 3.9 of the addendum in respect of changes to biodiversity net gain are agreed. That's that one bit. There is more. Should I pause?
Councillor Coucher.
Can I just say, I'm really quite supportive of what we're talking about in relation to viability and affordable housing, because clearly, obviously, I think, as has been said already this evening, no affordable housing in Bidford is totally and utterly unacceptable, and we need to be able to respond to that. So that's the sort of stuff that we're wanting to refine before the final draft.
Absolutely, making sure that there are homes that our children can afford. Yes, exactly. Councillor Davison.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Coucher, for raising that. It is notable in the questions we asked about viability. The standard response was, this matter will need to be referred to the viability consultants for a response. So at the minute, as councillors, we can't know what's been done, what are the inputs, how can we change it. Doesn't mean we can get affordable housing in Bidford, but we should at least try as hard as we can. So the next recommendation is to note that urgent work is needed to finalise the viability assessment before the Reg 19 consultation. The one after that, note that all the above recommendations need to be agreed by both councils in order for the South Warwickshire Local Plan to progress to a publication of Regulation 19 consultation. So at the start of the consultation on the Regulation 19 South Warwickshire Plan needs to be revised, i.e. delayed. Yeah, I'll keep going.
Councillor Coucher.
Sorry, I feel give a commentary on your proposal here. I mean, I think in an ideal world, Chair, we would be going out to consult before the holiday period, because obviously that gives them maximum transparency and appropriateness. But I think there are exceptional reasons why we may need to delay, and unfortunately a consultation period is going to be probably over the main part of the holiday period, possibly in late July and August. I don't think it's what ideally we would like, but I think what we will need to do is to give lots of publicity out there that clearly, obviously, the final plan probably won't be available until the middle of July, and so therefore consultation will be in that very sensitive period.
I'd just like to be able to say at this stage about when I say thank you to all the people, the residents that have come tonight, but also all the residents that have emailed. That through this plan, the various consultation responses. There have been 22,600 consultation responses from over 5,800 individuals and groups that came through the early stages, and then there was another 400 that came more recently, and then there's been 30 or 40 in the last few days. All of those will be, at the moment there is a report summarising and analysing the public consultation that came earlier on the South Warwickshire Local Plan, and I do hope that all the other responses will be taken into consideration as well. I mean, it has been quite enormous, 22,600 consultation responses, and everybody has to have, and all those views have to be balanced against each other. But I do hope that a lot of people do need to look at the South Warwickshire Local Plan website. It is very, very interesting to see the amount of technical evidence that has been gathered there. Councillor Coucher, do you want to continue, or do you want Councillor Davison?
Thank you. So that was more or less in anyway. The subsection A is added is arrange additional scrutiny, joint cabinet and full council meetings in June or July so that councillors consider this draft plan and propose consultation, and that these dates be agreed and published by the 10th of June 2026.
Councillor Coucher.
I think there is a backstop to this. We can't just let it be open. I think we have to have the words by the middle of. We have to have agreement by both councils by the middle of July. Otherwise, frankly, consultation is meaningless because we won't have any time to deal with any of the consultation replies if it's much later than that. So I think subject to agreement that we can do it by the middle of July. I think we're happy with that.
Okay. Okay.
I think we ought to amend it then. When I said meetings in June or July, I think it's by the middle of July. So we use those words.
I think we've got a council meeting on July the 17th, or 13th, sorry. So that is probably something like that. There has to be a date that is decided. Obviously, Warwick District Council has other dates for their council meetings, but we've got one on July the 13th.
I'm looking at our monitoring officer and he's smiling, so I think middle of July is all right. Moving on, this one is the same as before. Note that once the Regulation 19 consultation has been undertaken, the opportunities for either council to make changes to the South Warwickshire local plan are very limited. That was there anyway.
Okay, Councillor Couch.
Yes, but we do make some. We may want to make minor changes. I'm hoping that we can get everything drafted by the middle of July, but evidence is all the time coming in, and we may have the opportunity to make amendments to the plan right up to the 31st of December. But yes, I note the words very limited. I'm just giving that caveat that we may need to make some further changes.
Yeah, I mean it is expected, and it is certainly standard practice that work continues. It doesn't just stop on just with the Reg 19. But if there are, but it's not. We're not talking about major changes or anything like that. We're talking about as if evidence comes in. Councillor Davison, do you want to carry on?
Yes, this next bit is important because it links with it, and it's given the work required above, propose that once both councils have approved the Reg 19 consultation, that the South Warwickshire local plan will not be considered and approved for submission by either council prior to it being submitted to the Secretary of State for examination by the 31st of December 2026. And I just want to explain that. The advice we've had from officers is that if we delay now, we are really going very tight to the wire. So to have further meetings when we have much less input on what we can do, there's far less we can do afterwards than before Reg 19. It's far better to spend the few weeks now to get the plan as good as we can before going to consultation.
Councillor Couch, do you want to comment on that?
The chair of Stratford's OSC committee has asked for further scrutiny. I think we've probably got time for further scrutiny before the 13th of July, so that we can get further input before hopefully the final draft is done. However, I have some reservations because I think we have given commitments to other councillors within Stratford District that they would actually sign off the plan before it actually goes to the Secretary of State. So I think actually being categoric about that at this point in time is kind of is difficult. I think there needs to be further discussion about that.
Okay. Are you prepared to accept that, just on that there should be further discussion on that point?
Well, at the minute we're advisory, aren't we? So I think we'll need our officers' advice on that. And I'd obviously like to hear officers' views as well.
Okay. Would you like to come in, Mr. Burks?
Yes, as you correctly identified, this group is an advisory group. It doesn't have decision-making powers. It makes recommendations to the full council bodies. If the feeling of this group following your debate today is one of your recommendations, sorry, can everybody hear? I'm not talking right into the microphone. If you're minded tonight to agree that you would like to recommend that as a course of action along the lines that Councillor Davidson has described, you could make that as a recommendation to the two councils. If they both approved it, that would then become the policy and that would become the situation. But we're not in a position we can decide that tonight.
Thank you. Do you want to continue?
I have one final one,
yep.
And that's whilst the commitment from both officers and councillors to deliver the local plan in the restricted timeline and demanding circumstances is most welcome, we ask the chief executives of both councils to ensure that all relevant officers and councillors are fully engaged in completion of the above tasks. This is saying it is top priority. Councillor Day, when he suggested this, said, lock us in a room with the officers till we agree, and I hope that captures what he was trying to say.
Okay, Councillor Coucher.
I'm happy to second that.
I'm
happy to second that. I have to say, I have every confidence in officers and councillors. We've had, I think, superb support from officers to date, and I'm not sure that is going to in any way be questioned. And also, I think a large number of councillors have also been very, very engaged in this process. I personally would want to make tribute as portfolio holder to all councillors, particularly those that have got strategic growth areas and the new settlement in their patches. They've given a lot of time over that, and I think are going to have to give even more time over the next six weeks to make sure we refine the proposals accordingly. But yes,
so we have a recommendation that's been proposed and seconded, and it is, Councillor Coucher has seconded it. But it's subject, obviously, to a response from officers and also the councils. The councils have to debate and agree on this one. But this is what is going to go forward to those councils with advice coming from officers as to any details or anything that they think may not be, viable or deliverable under the local plan. So are we all, any other comments that anybody wants to make? If not, I will put it to the vote that we've got a recommendation for a long series of recommendations. It has been seconded. Are we all in favour of that recommendation going forward? Okay. And I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. I think that is the end of the debate today. Unless we've got any other urgent business, which I haven't been informed about, any urgent business that's been raised with me?
No, there is no urgent business.
Okay. So can I just say thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for taking part in a very mature debate. And thank you for everybody that has contributed right the way through this process, a long, long process that's been going since 2021, and a lot of people have input over that period. I'd like to thank them all. Thank you. Bye-bye.